What's up, everybody? Today's video is how football has changed dramatically over the years. My name is Greg. I'm an American living abroad in Spain, learning the beautiful game of football one reaction at a time with your help. All right, this is from the funny old game. I will definitely leave a link in the description so you can go and show them some love. And of course, we always want to get people more subscribers. So if we can get him another 1,000 at least, I'm sure he'd be happy. So go on over there and do that. And this is going to be interesting, how football has changed dramatically over the years. I mean, it's changing probably every single year. So I'm curious to know what the history of it was and how we get to where we are right now. Let me get everything set up here for you so it looks all pretty and everything. All right, y'all ready? Here we go. Let's take a look.
Football is called the beautiful game, but its history isn't always pretty. It's come a long way in over 150 years, from questionable tackles to even more questionable kits, through to a Playboy.
Whoa. Is that real?
Way in over 150 years, from questionable tackles to even more questionable.
Is that real? It can't be real.
Kits, through to a Playboy billion-dollar industry. Let's take a look at the good, the bad, and the ugly of the beautiful game's evolution. When the game was started way back in the times when children were better seen up chimneys than heard, the split between rugby and football was defined between attitudes towards kicking or hacking your opponents in the shins, to the point where one of the gentlemen present at the game's origin story said, "If you do away with hacking, you will do away with all the courage and pluck of the game, and I will be bound to bring over a lot of Frenchmen who would beat you with a week's practice." Frenchmen beating aside, times have changed now to the point where if you look at a player funny, you might get sent off. Back when the game was formed, it was seen as a gentleman's sport. The Football Association didn't bother with fouls until they had to, presumably because it wasn't always gentlemen that played the game. This was definitely the case in the glory days of football in the 60s and 70s, when smoking was part of a pre-match workout.
That's interesting. I can imagine it's probably very similar to like how in the NBA, like people like, well, I wasn't in the NBA, but I played basketball. You know, back when I played, it was more physical, low scoring games, all of that. And now it's not as physical. So I wonder if that's what's happening here. Kind of seems like it.
The case in the glory days of football in the 60s and 70s, when smoking was part of a pre-match workout. Back then, if you threw a punch at a player, knocked him out, or broke his leg, you might get a slap on the wrist or possibly a booking if you were unlucky.
Yeah, that's right. You go and watch some of the NBA games from the, say the 80s, early 90s. Yeah, there was fights and everything and people wouldn't get ejected. So it's different now.
The only time players went down wasn't to trick the ref, but because they weren't able to stand. The professional foul only became a thing in England after the 1980 FA Cup final, when Arsenal's Willie Young hacked down Paul Allen of West Ham. Had West Ham not won the game anyway, there would have been a full-scale riot. But the incident was enough to prompt the FA to propose the professional foul law, where a player gets a red if they stop a goal-scoring opportunity. It took a massive 10 years before it became an international law of the game, in time for the Italia 90 World Cup. The law was tweaked later.
10 years? Wow, so they did not want to see that change.
Before it became an international law of the game, in time for the Italia 90 World Cup. The law was tweaked later to allow for a little bit more leeway in 2016 if a player is genuinely trying to play the ball. And all the laws have been changed over the years, making the game more FA and less MMA.
Wait, what just happened? Is that real?
Genuinely trying to play the ball. And all the laws have been changed over the years, making the game more FA and less MMA, for better or worse. Wouldn't it be great if teams played with 8 strikers? Well, they used to. When England played Scotland in their first ever international match in 1872, England went with a formation of 1-1-8 and a very defensive 1-2-7 at different times, while Scotland opted for the park the bus method with a 2-2-6. Then when Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenney's Wrexham won the Welsh Cup in 1877, the side played a revolutionary pyramid formation of a 2-3-5. This would start a trend that would be helped by the Scottish style of passing football that needed a more balanced setup. Then the introduction of offside in 1925, and more importantly the potential to exploit it, led
1925 is the introduction of offsides. I think that's what I heard.
Then the introduction of offside in 1925, and more importantly the potential to exploit it, led to Herbert Chapman's Arsenal employing an extra defender to play the offside trap and counter-attack tactics. Fast forward to the 50s, and the powerhouse of the hungriest team at the time, Hungary. coached by Gustav Siebes. He was the first person to adapt formations to suit the opponent that would let wingers support depending if they were defending or attacking. This ideology would evolve and lead to Brazil's iconic 4-3-3 and England's own version of that formation, which would lead to World Cup success in 1966, which no Englishman has ever mentioned since. The Italian defensive methodology of the 70s and 80s, as well as the German attacking throwback of Italia 90, led to teams having the option of choosing a formation that was adaptable and played to their strengths. I, for one, can't wait for a team
I like that exercise.
having the option of choosing a formation that was adaptable and played to their strengths. I, for one, can't wait for a team to bring back the 1-1-8 system. We're used to breathable, lightweight, and possibly too skin-tight fabric.
Here we go with this again.
With kits these days. Think the complete opposite when the game started. Football kits in the late 1800s were rudimentary, simple, long-sleeve shirts in solid colours, with shorts that weren't short, and sturdy leather boots. Endorsements weren't really a thing. As the game began to spread quicker than a player trying to win a penalty, overseas clubs adopted kits similar to those worn in the UK where the game came from. Like Italian giants Juventus, who, in 1903...
Okay, I know I'm showing my ignorance, lack of a better word. UK is where it came from? The game came from? Sorry, I didn't know that. I think that's what I heard
began
him
to
say.
spread quicker than a player trying to win a penalty. Overseas clubs adopted kits similar to those worn in the UK where the game came from. Like Italian giants Juventus, who, in 1903, embraced a black and white strip inspired by the now not-so-giant Notts County. There was the introduction of more intricate designs like the mind-blowing stripes, and shorts became shorter as the FA dropped the rule that players nick.
Who was it that's wearing stripes? Damn. Was it Ireland? I think they were green and white. And I don't remember. But I did learn that it's probably not a good idea to make fun of those. Although I can't help but make fun of the skinless suits because I don't know what those are. Kits. I don't know what those were.
Knickerbockers must cover the knees. Scandalous, but not quite as scandalous as 80s shorts. Just yet. The 50s and 60s saw big changes in kit designs. Shirts became more tailored, often had collars, and club badges with the occasional sponsor. Shirt numbers became normalised, but names would have to wait. The 70s and 80s marked a period of flamboyant designs.
Here we go, yeah. Go ahead.
Became normalised, but names would have to wait. The 70s and 80s marked a period of flamboyant designs and bold experimentation, both with players and football kits. Collars disappeared, and V-neck or round neck styles became popular. The static electricity factory of polyester emerged as a primary fabric, enhancing breathability and durability. Iconic and bold designs like those of the Admiral kits gained prominence despite being associated with one of the worst England teams of all time. This period also started the disgusting tradition of shirt swapping. In the 1970 World Cup, Bobby Moore and Pelé exchanged sweaty clothes. After this, the tradition spread and became commonplace, as did short shorts that barely...
That started in the 70s? Seems like in America, it just started, obviously not with football, but with basketball. I think that's where it is mostly. I think that might be it. Maybe in football, American football.
Kept the boys in the barracks. The 90s ushered in the modern era of kits in all its corporate glory. More on how the financial side of football has changed later. We started to see a fusion of tradition and innovation in the designs as the new millennium dawned. Technological advancements led to lightweight, moisture-wicking fabrics that improved performance. Sponsors became more prominent, and manufacturers began incorporating advanced printing techniques for even more headache-inducing designs. Just like formations, the 21st century for kits introduced a bastardized mix of everything that had gone before. But before footballs were made from money, they started off as being made out of pigs' bladders. The big problem with this is not all bladders are made equal. They were different shapes and sizes. So it wasn't until the introduction of rubber inner tubes by Richard Linden in 1862 that things started to get a little bit more standardized. It's thought that Linden came up with the idea of using India rubber to make the ball after his wife, who had been helping him blow up the bladders into balls, passed away, likely from a disease she caught from one of the pig's innards. Which puts complaining about VAR into perspective.
Check complete, it's fine. Perfect.
When Mitre started mass-producing balls a couple of decades later, they believed that one of the most important qualities was that the ball could keep its shape, because a cube isn't great for rolling.
No.
Because of this, very thick and heavy leather was used, with cow's rump making the best balls and cow's shoulder making the cheaper ones. At the turn of the century, the inner bladders of the balls were made from a strong rubber that could withstand a lot of pressure. Its outer part was made up of leather that was formed of 18 sections. It was dyed dark brown because why not? And it was a nightmare to head, especially as the leather would absorb water it came across. In the 1930 World Cup final, Argentina and Uruguay couldn't agree on which ball to use, as it still wasn't standardized internationally. They agreed to use an Argentinian ball in the first half and a Uruguay equivalent in the second. Argentina were 2-1 up at half-time, only to lose 4-2 at the final whistle. Anyone who experienced this match and or the Jubilani ball of the 2010 World Cup will tell you how important the ball is. Material started to be used between the inside and outside of the ball after this, and in the 50s it became white to help people see it better with floodlights being introduced. Before this, it must have been like a live spot the ball game. Despite the World Cup final we looked at earlier, no lessons were learned, as a standardized ball wasn't introduced until years later. This was helped by a new design of ball developed by Richard Buckminster Fuller. The Bucky provided the classic clip art football we're used to, made up of 20 hexagonal and 12 pentagonal surfaces, sewn together to create a near-perfect sphere, which was used for the first time at the 1970 World Cup in Mexico. It was the first design to feature alternating black and white panels, with the hope being that the light and dark combo would allow players to see the swerve on the ball. It wasn't until as late as 1998 that a ball was introduced at the World Cup with a little bit of colour on it. It featured blue and red to complete the tricolour of the host nation France. Since then, the football has been re-engineered down to 14 moulded as opposed to stitched panels, with the Adidas Teamgeist of 2006. Then just the 8 panels of the Jubilani that swang more than a bored middle-aged couple. Now balls come in all shapes and sizes, and that's why it's important to check them at regular intervals.
What the hell?
Now it's commonplace to pay players hundreds of thousands of pounds a week to kick a pig's bladder around. 150 years ago, it was illegal to pay your players at all. The biggest scandal in football history at that point came in 1879, when 2 players from Darwin in England were found to be given actual money for their performances. This rocked the footballing world and gave many players and teams ideas of their own. This created a dark web equivalent of backdoor payments, until the FA finally brought in professionalism in 1885. Almost immediately, the market went crazy, causing the leagues to impose a strict wage limit of a huge £4 a week, around just under £500 today. In 1905, the highest transfer fee so far in history was recorded. Alf Common joined Middlesbrough for a giant £1,000, around £120,000 in new money. Small by today's standards, but it set off a chain reaction in fees trending upwards. In 1922, the average weekly wage was increased to an eye-watering £8, and in 1928, David Jack was the first footballer to be transferred for a fee above £10,000 from Bolton to Arsenal. That's about $630k now. The floodgates had opened. After World War II, the UK had announced high spending to recover from the damage done by the conflict, and football was more than happy to oblige.
Oh, okay. I was confused, okay.
UK had announced high spending to recover from the damage done by the conflict, and football was more than happy to oblige, but still had a wage cap of £12 per week, or £506 today. In 1961, the PFA scrapped all of this, and it led to the first player being paid £100 per week, Johnny Haynes. Just 1 year after that, £100,000 was paid for Dennis Law to arrive to Manchester United from Torino. That's around £2 million today, but all this was pocket change in comparison to what was to come. Trevor Francis was the first £1 million transfer player in 1979, when Nottingham Forest snapped him up during their glory days. 15 years later, Chris Sutton was paid £10,000 a week, and only 1 year after that, Dennis Bergkamp was paid £25k a week when he joined Arsenal, with defender Stuart Pearce calling it a huge waste of money. He should have waited until post-Ferguson Man United era. In the year 2000, Sol Campbell quadrupled Bergkamp's wages in his move from Spurs to Arsenal. This marked pay increasing from £100 to £100,000 a week in just 40 years. Fast forward to now, and you've got Ronaldo earning over £170 million a year from playing Sunday League football in Saudi Arabia. And a big part of this massive increase in money is down to our next topic. The first match shown on UK television was not Manchester United v Liverpool or Tottenham v Chelsea. No, it was 1937, with a match between Arsenal and Arsenal reserves, to a very select group of people close to the BBC's broadcasting centre of Alexandra Palace. This mighty clash didn't start a trend. This in part was due to worse coverage than when ITV had Premier League rights. In 1946, the BBC broadcast the mighty Barnet versus the formidable Wealdstone. 20 minutes of the first half and 25 minutes of the second were broadcast before it became too dark to see. In the early years of TV's explosion, it was only FA Cup matches and the odd international match that would be shown live, and it took until 1960 for a top-flight league match to be broadcast live for the first time, even though they wish they hadn't. The game was between Blackpool and Bolton Wanderers. It kicked off at 6:50 p.m, but people couldn't watch until 7:30, so that those at the 3 p.m. games could make it home to watch it. This bizarre fear that TV would disrupt the sacred time of English football is still around today, so much so it's written into law. But this game was so dull, it put...
Wait, what's written into law? Football Association may prohibit the broadcast of games between, 14:45 and 17:15 on Saturdays.
Football is still around today, so much so it's written into law. But this game was so dull, it put TV companies off broadcasting live games altogether. The next milestone was the introduction of Match of the Day in 1964, showing highlights of top-flight games and ruining the evenings of significant others across the nation. After that, the 1966 World Cup was the first time football had gone global to a wide audience, with games being offered to watch live. But even then, top-flight live games were few and far between, mainly because of the fear I mentioned earlier that people would stop going to stadiums to watch games. Highlight packages could only be broadcast after 10 p.m. for the same reason. Thank God they did this, because with the amount of live games on now, it's no wonder the stadiums are all empty. It wasn't until the 80s that the Football League decided their...
Is that true? Stadiums are all empty? Wait, was he being sarcastic? Am I just late to the party?
Now, it's no wonder the stadiums are all empty. It wasn't until the 80s that the Football League decided their games could be broadcast live more often, and that's only because they were struggling for money. A 1983 deal worth a huge £2.6 million a year at the time saw the BBC allowed to show live matches on a Friday and ITV getting to broadcast Sunday afternoon games. But this deal was nothing in comparison to what was around the corner. The biggest clubs in Europe were getting paid big money for coverage, apart from those in the UK, because TV wealth was getting distributed evenly throughout the 4 English leagues. The likes of big clubs Liverpool, Arsenal and Manchester United began to feel that they were missing out. In 1992, First Division clubs all voted unanimously to break away and form the Premier League, which gave Rupert Murdoch's newly formed...
Hold on. Sorry.
All voted unanimously to break away and feel that they were missing out. In 1992, First Division clubs all voted unanimously
1992
to break away and form the Premier League, which gave Rupert Murdoch's newly formed cable offering Sky...
Rupert Murdoch. Wow, he's over here too.
Leveraged to negotiate a deal to cover this new league.
He's in the US, so that's how I know him.
For the price of just £304 million for 5 years. A steal compared to the £6.7 billion they paid for the latest batch of seasons. Football is called the beautiful...
Okay, well that's super interesting. So a lot has changed, obviously. The ball, the kits, the amount of money that they make, the TV deals. I don't think we really talked about the fields that much, though. I don't think I heard anything about that. That's awesome. That's good. That's good. It's good for me to know. Learned a couple things in there. Learned when the Premier League started. Rupert Murdoch. Things like that. All right. Let's take a look and see what the people got to say here. Okay. Let's see. 12 minutes of wall-to-wall jokes. There were some jokes in there, and I've missed some of them, I'm sure. And I'm sure you're going to let me know which ones I missed. Great video and hilarious to boot. It was pretty funny. All right. This is my current favorite channel. All right. It's going to be mine too. That's so far I liked what I saw. All right. At 1:50, the defensive 1-2-7 only works well if you play counterattack and offside trap simultaneously. Maybe that's a joke. I mean, I don't know. Somebody have to help me out with that. This channel only has 300 subs. What? Oh, I should have more than that for sure. Enjoyed it so much, I subbed. Top content. All right. That was great. Good video there, Mr. Funny Old Man. I appreciate that. As always, thank you for stopping by, and we will see you on the next video. Peace.